I'm a student who dreams of becoming a writer. In my free time, I work on a supernatural novel about ghosts. I live in a 2-story building with just 4 apartments. Mine is on the first floor, a tiny but cozy bedroom. The living room, combined with the kitchen, is a bit bigger. The furnishings are a bit old-fashioned. The bed, the linen wardrobe, the round table, all made of wood and intricately carved. I even had an antique grandfather clock with a pendulum. Granted, it didn't work, but it gave the place a mysterious vibe. Maybe that's why I decided to write a book in the style of the Gothic novels of centuries past. In the apartment across the hall lived a girl named Jana. I was madly in love with her. To me, she wasn't just a pretty doll. She was a real mystery. I thought this girl was smart and talented. She had a dream. She wanted to design clothes and make her name a part of fashion history. Right above me lived a young family, Valerie, his wife Svetlana, and their 2 kids, twins, a boy and a girl named Vanya and Tanya. Those kids were insanely energetic. Sometimes they got so wild that dust would fall from the ceiling. And in the last apartment lived the quietest family, an elderly couple, Anfisa and Nikolai. The old lady was kindness itself, and her husband, a quiet old man, always seemed to be in his own world. My typical evening. I'm sitting at my desk, hands on the keyboard, trying to gather my thoughts and write at least something. But, alas, nothing comes out. Upstairs, the kids are going wild, running around and laughing. I sigh in resignation. And then, a knock at the door. "Who is it?" I shouted without getting up. "Nazar, it's Aunt Anfisa," came the old lady's voice from the hallway. I went to open the door. The elderly neighbor didn't come empty-handed. She was holding a round, golden brown pie. "Hello." I stepped aside, inviting her into the apartment. "Hello, hello." The neighbor crossed the threshold. "I brought you a pie. Bake too many again. Grandpa and I can't eat that much, it'll go to waste." Aunt Anfisa seemed like a kind fairy tale grandmother. A plump woman in slippers, a purple housecoat, and a checkered apron, wearing half-moon glasses and with a gray bun at the back of her head. "Aunt Anfisa, you spoil me. I feel almost embarrassed," I said, even as I reached for the pie. The neighbor waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, you and you're embarrassed. Not embarrassed. You fixed our armchair, and now I'm just giving you a treat. You've got kids upstairs in the neighboring apartment, but you always bring things to me." I looked at the smooth crust of the pie, and it seemed delicious to me. "Those little rascals don't eat anything," Aunt Anfisa replied. "All right, then I'll eat it without any guilt," I promised. "Your baking is the tastiest. Eat, eat." The elderly neighbor nodded. "You're a student. You need sweets so your brain works." "Thank you." I put the pie on the table. I really did feel awkward, but why refuse someone's kindness? "If you have time, stop by," Aunt Anfisa asked. "Grandpa's armchair is wobbly again." I nodded and said, "I'll come by today. No rush, it's not urgent." The old lady reassured me. "Enjoy your meal." And just as she left, just as I sat down to write, there was another knock at the door. From the way the knock sounded, I knew it was Jana. She had always been a welcome guest for me. I opened the door and saw her. It was as if she had stepped right out of the pages of my future novel. Or rather, the other way around, I had long since written her into my book as the heroine. A perfectly smooth, pale face, neat eyebrows, rosy cheeks, and bright red lips curved in a slight smile. Large blue eyes framed by thick lashes. Golden hair down to her waist. A soft blue dress, white knee socks on her legs, and little shoes. "Hi, Nazar. Can I come in?" she asked. I opened the door wide for her. "Come in, of course. You're just in time." Aunt Anfisa brought over a pie. "Want some tea?" "Coffee would be better," the girl said. "Do you have any, or should I bring some?" I have it. Come on in." Jana finally fluttered into my apartment, ran up to the table, and leaned over the pie. What a smell. Is this a cherry pie? Looks like it, I replied, though I thought to myself how strange it was that I hadn't noticed any aroma until she asked. But as soon as she mentioned it, my nose was tickled by the sweet scent of cherries and baked dough with a hint of vanilla. I was always daydreaming and never paid attention to anything. "So, tell me, how's your book coming along?" Jana was suddenly beside me, helping with the dishes. "You know, I'm stuck at one spot," I admitted. "I just can't seem to get things moving. Maybe you need a little inspiration?" The girl suddenly, as if by accident, brushed my hand. "Where am I supposed to find it?" My voice trembled. Jana looked me straight in the eyes. Our faces were so close, and I lost my breath. But then she pulled away and averted her gaze. "Oh, sorry. I just remembered I might have left the iron on. I'll be right back." "Okay." I barely managed to say it, and Jana was already gone. She was always like that. It was hard to tell whether she was really embarrassed in awkward moments like these, or if she was just teasing me. I had just set the cups on the table when she came back. "Here I am. What about the iron?" I asked. It was turned off. Jana flopped down onto a chair. Perfect. I hadn't even noticed how we managed to polish off an entire pie while chatting. We talked about this and that. Jana told me about her sketches and promised to show me some new brilliant dresses soon. And I replied that I was looking forward to it. Then the girl tried to get some details out of me about how the book's plot was developing. But there was nothing to tell at that point. "The pie was amazing. Thank you, Aunt Anfazia," Jana said, getting up from her chair and glancing at the stopped clock. "Well, it's time for me to go draw. Thanks for the coffee." "Anytime," I replied. We spent another wonderful evening together, but didn't make any progress in our relationship at all. It was completely unclear whether she only had friendly feelings for me or something more. Truly, she was a mysterious girl. I put the dishes in the sink and went to bed. That was the last normal day. And in the morning, something happened that changed my life forever. It seemed like a trivial thing, but once I noticed it, everything started to go wrong. I walked out of the bedroom and froze. The old grandfather clock was in a different place. Yesterday it stood to the left of the window, and now it was to the right of the front door. Who could have moved it? Definitely not me. And the dishes had disappeared from the sink. Where could they have gone? I opened the kitchen cupboard. The cups and plates were there. How strange. That just can't be. Who would break into someone else's apartment just to wash the dishes and move the clock? The noise and running water would have definitely woken me up. I inspected my entire apartment, checking if everything was in its place. But then I caught myself thinking that I didn't really remember where everything was supposed to be. Looks like being attentive isn't exactly my strong suit. I moved the clock and put it to the right of the window. That felt more familiar. But it didn't make me feel any calmer. My mind was desperately searching for explanations and couldn't solve this mystery. Another day flew by, full of worries. Another night spent in deep sleep. And in the morning, a new miracle. The wardrobe in the bedroom, which had been against one wall, was now on the opposite side. I couldn't have slept so soundly that I wouldn't notice someone moving it. The nightstand was now on the other side of the bed too. I started to feel uneasy. Someone was messing with me, trying to drive me crazy. Or did this happen to me all by itself? Was I moving the furniture in my sleep? How could I check that? Chain myself to the bed? I went into the living room where the table was no longer in the center, but a bit off to the side. I decided not to have coffee. My head was already spinning. Upstairs, Kids were making noise, and the stairway railings creaked. Someone was chatting with someone else. It was just an ordinary day. After sitting still for a bit, I managed to calm down. What was happening in the house wasn't a disaster, at least not yet. A little later, Jana knocked on my door. As always, I recognized her by her distinctive knock. She hadn't come for no reason, but for a special occasion. Her new outfit was finally ready. When I opened the door, I saw a girl in a sparkling lilac dress with flutter sleeves. "Hi, Nazar, can I come in?" she asked. Jana probably wanted to knock me off my feet with her look, but I was so overwhelmed that I couldn't really appreciate it. "Oh, you finished sewing your new dress," I said, forcing a smile. "Yes, I came to show it off to you. Do you like it?" She fluttered into my apartment and spun around. The skirt floated above the floor like a lilac cloud. "It's very beautiful," I said. "You look like a princess in it." "All right then, I'll make myself a crown." Jana slightly lifted her skirt and sat down on a chair. I muttered. "Will you make me some coffee?" she asked. "Yes, of course." I walked over to the shelf, hoping to find the dishes in their usual places. I didn't want to show my gloomy mood, but the girl didn't seem to notice it at all. She only wanted to talk about creativity. "So, tell me, how's your book coming along?" "Jana, I'd like to talk about something else," I said, thinking that I wouldn't be able to share this with anyone else. "What is it?" A hint of worry flashed across her face. "I think I'm going crazy," I whispered. Jana frowned. "Are you serious?" Yeah, I nodded. Things move from place to place. They just move on their own. Have you seen it happen? The girl looked around the room, as if expecting something like that to happen right before her eyes. I shook my head. "No, I haven't seen it. I just noticed that the wardrobe is sometimes against one wall, then against another. And the clock, I can't even remember where it used to stand." "It's just like in your book," the girl exclaimed excitedly. I frowned. "Is it?" "You're writing about a haunted house, aren't you?" Jana reminded me. "You think I've got a ghost now?" I tried to figure out what she was getting at. And suddenly the girl blurted out something silly. "What if everything you write comes true?" "What do you mean?" I didn't understand. "The magic of words, you know? Maybe you're a powerful telepath, and everything you come up with materializes." Jana was waving her arms excitedly. "Well, I don't know." I decided not to discuss what was happening with her anymore. It seemed like she was trying to convince me that it wasn't creepy, but interesting. Now it became clear to me that this girl didn't care about my worries. Jana was too lighthearted for serious conversations. A couple of minutes later, she had already forgotten what I was talking about and was confidently telling me how she sewed her dress. She talked about her new sketches. She crunched on cookies, sipping her coffee. Jana didn't notice that I wasn't listening to her at all, just responding automatically with, "Yeah, uh-huh." Or maybe she just didn't care. I had never felt so lonely in someone's company before. And the madness kept going, only getting stronger. The next morning, I got out of bed with a clear intention to ignore the arrangement of things. But in the living room, something was waiting for me that simply couldn't be ignored. A wooden rocking chair. It was right by the door, blocking the way. I immediately knew who this belonged to, and a stab of fear hit me. Could it be that one of the old folks from upstairs had lost their mind? Or both of them at once? What if they stole my key, made a copy, and come here at night to do something completely senseless? I imagined old Aunt Anfisa and her husband Nikolai, in the dark and total silence, moving the clock from place to place. The old woman in her nightgown, the old man in his worn-out long johns. They peek into my room, look at me sleeping, and smile. A nightmare. What if they put sleeping pills in the drinks or pastries they offer me, and that's why I don't hear anything? Paranoia. The elderly couple must have had an explanation. I quickly washed up, got dressed, grabbed the armchair, and lugged it up to the second floor. "Who is it?" A sleepy voice responded to my knock. "Hello, Aunt Anfisa. It's Nazar," I shouted. The elderly neighbor opened the door, her face silently asking, "Why are you here so early? This is your armchair, right?" I asked. The old woman lowered her gaze, and her eyebrows shot up to her forehead. "Looks like ours, but how did you get it?" "That's what I wanted to ask you. It just sort of appeared in my apartment." "That can't be." It seemed Aunt Anfisa really had no idea how their chair ended up at my place. I asked, "Didn't you notice it was missing?" The woman shrugged, then turned around and shouted into the apartment, "OL, someone brought your rocking chair back." "About time," the old man grumbled. He stepped out onto the landing, calmly took the chair, and went back inside. The old woman was simply bewildered. What a strange turn of events. I can't for the life of me figure out how this happened. The mystery remained unsolved. You could change the locks or stop eating and drinking altogether. It wouldn't make a difference. Has the building gone mad? Or has it always been crazy and I just never noticed? I was always lost in my own fantasies, pondering the plot of my book, stealing glances at my neighbor Jana and thinking how beautiful she was. Meanwhile, things around me were happening that defied all logic. I had to get to the bottom of it. I couldn't think of anything smarter than just to observe. I went back to my place, sat down on the couch, and started looking around. Everything was in its place. The coat rack by the door, the chairs, the table, the window, the blue curtains, the antique grandfather clock. The hands were frozen at 5 minutes to 12. The pendulum hung motionless. Felt as if time had stopped. And suddenly I realized it had become too quiet in the house. There were no kids running wild upstairs, no one shuffling in slippers, no creaking of the banister. Not a single sound at all. It was as if I had gone deaf. And suddenly, a wave of panic hit me so hard it became difficult to breathe. I jumped up from the couch and ran into the hallway, started banging on my neighbor's door. "Jana, are you there?" She didn't answer. A dead silence had settled over our building. I rushed upstairs and knocked on the door of the elderly neighbors who were always home. "Aunt Anfisa, Uncle Kolya," I shouted through the door, but they stayed silent. They couldn't have all left the building at once. Now I was knocking on the door of the young family. "Valerie, Svetlana, is anyone there?" And the door opened all by itself. Their door turned out to be unlocked. The door swung open silently, and I saw the owners of the apartment. They were sitting at an empty table, staring into each other's eyes. Their faces didn't move, and their eyes didn't blink. The two of them sat there like statues. At first, I thought they were playing some kind of strange game, but too much time had passed. "Valerie, what's wrong with you?" I whispered, looking at the man. There was no spark of life in his eyes, and not a single hair on his head moved. Feeling an emptiness in my chest, I walked into the unfamiliar apartment and approached the table to make sure of what I was seeing. Svetlana was sitting there, her hands slightly raised above the table. Her thick dark hair seemed to have hardened. Her eyes were wide open, her lips frozen in a calm smile. "Svetlana, can you hear me?" I waved my hand in front of her face. No reaction at all. Husband and wife were frozen in time. I walked through the living room and peeked into the slightly open bedroom. The children were lying on their beds. They were grinning widely, staring at the ceiling. Panic reached its peak. I screamed, hoping it would snap everyone out of it. But no one heard that scream. The little children lay in their beds, smiling up at the ceiling. The adults were drilling each other with invisible stares. I ran toward the exit, and right by the door, Valerie's voice called out to me. "Nazar, what are you doing here?" I stopped and slowly turned my head. Valerie and Svetlana were looking at me in confusion. They were alive again. "I just came in to check if everything was all right. It was so quiet. Your door was open," I started to explain, so I wouldn't seem weird. I started to feel calmer. "Yeah, quiet," Svetlana said. "With these little rascals, there's not a minute of rest." Right then, the mischievous twins burst out of the bedroom. They rushed at me, shouting, "Nazar, Nazar, Nazar." "Maybe you could watch them sometime?" Valerie asked half-jokingly. "So we could get at least a little rest?" "Yes, I'd be happy to." "Sorry for bothering you. I'll head to my place," I said, and quickly stepped out the door so the kids wouldn't grab my legs. There was an old man standing on the landing. He didn't even look my way, just sighed thoughtfully, lost in his own thoughts. "Hello, Uncle Kolya," I said. He replied quietly. And then it suddenly occurred to me to discuss what was happening with him. After all, he's an old man, wise with experience. Maybe he has some idea about what's going on here? "Uncle Kolya, don't you think our building is kind of strange, even crazy, I'd say?" I notice, the elderly neighbor nodded. "But I've long since gotten used to it and accepted it." "Accepted it?" I was surprised. The old man finally looked at me and asked seriously, "Where would I go from here?" "What do you mean?" I didn't understand what he was getting at. It was all too vague. "There's no meaning here," the old man said. "I've long since grown tired of these games." "What games?" I asked for an explanation, but the old man suddenly frowned. "Ah, go to hell, you empty shell," always pestering me with questions. After saying something nasty, he turned away and went back to his place. I never would have thought my elderly neighbor was such a rude person. I'd never heard anything like that from him before. What did I do to deserve that from him? Senile old fool. I went back down to my place. Out of habit, I looked around the room, making sure everything was in its place. The furniture was just as it had been before, but the feeling of safety had left me for good. It felt like something bad could happen at any moment. I had a sense of impending doom. And then the unimaginable happened. In an instant, it was as if our house tilted and collapsed into an abyss. I saw the furniture lift off the floor and crash into the ceiling on its own. And then it was as dark as night. We fell into the void. God only knows how much time passed. When I came to, I thought it was a dream, but I had to get up from the floor, not from my bed. It was light again, but my apartment was in chaos. The table, chairs, and sofa were all piled up together. The old grandfather clock was lying on its side. Things and dishes were scattered everywhere. What happened? Was it an earthquake or something? I realized I needed to get out of here. It didn't matter where, as long as it was far away, but not alone. I had to get Jana. We would leave this place together. I rushed out of my apartment and started banging on her door. "Jana, open up, quick." It was quiet in there, but I wasn't about to give up. I decided I would break down the door and get her out of there. I took a running start and kicked the door with all my strength, breaking the lock. The girl's apartment was a complete mess. Furniture, clothes, dishes. Everything was scattered everywhere. Jumping over the piles, I ran into the bedroom. "Jana, are you okay?" And then horror hit me right in the eyes. On the floor lay the girl's decapitated body, and her face, with a lifeless stare, was looking out from under the bed. The shock to our building was so strong, it killed her. Screaming, I ran out of the room. An old rotary phone ended up under my feet. It was like a lifeline for a drowning man. I grabbed the receiver and frantically dialed the emergency services number. Hello, can you hear me? Silence. To hell with the phone. I need to run to get outside immediately. And that sudden thought stunned me. What does it even mean to go outside? How do you even do that? Outside. Where is that exactly? Suddenly, I realized there was a huge blank spot in my mind. I couldn't remember, or maybe I never even knew, when was the last time I had been outside this house. But I'm a student. That means I study. But where do I study? What am I studying for? There were no answers to these questions in my head. I left the neighbor's apartment and looked around the stairwell. Where's the exit? There wasn't one. Only the open door to my own apartment. And inside, everything was already in its place. The dining table, chairs, the grandfather clock to the left of the window, the writing desk, and the typewriter. Who even uses typewriters to write books these days? They're outdated. So what do people use now? What year is it anyway? My mind has been blank for days. I wasn't panicking anymore. I wasn't running around in terror. Everything had somehow become indifferent. Suddenly, a shadow covered the living room window, as if it had gotten dark all at once. I looked over and saw an eye. A living window with a dark pupil and a gray iris, veins running through the white. A huge child's eye with thick eyelashes. It blinked and looked at me with curiosity, as if waiting for me to move. But that inquisitive gaze made me freeze in place. My arms and legs refused to move. And then everything became clear to me. Our house isn't real, it's a toy, and none of us here are real, we're just dolls for someone's game. And out there, outside, it's not a giant monster, not a giant, but a person. A living person unlike us. This sudden realization left me completely empty. The fear vanished without a trace. Just my usual evening. I'm sitting at my desk, hands on the keyboard, trying to gather my thoughts, to write at least something. But, alas, nothing comes out. Upstairs, the kids are going wild, running around and laughing. I sigh hopelessly. And then there's the knock at the door. Who is it? I ask, though I already know the answer. Nazar, it's Aunt Anfisa, came an elderly voice. Hello, I said, opening the door to my elderly neighbor. Hello, hello, Aunt Anfisa said, handing me a treat. I brought you a pie, I baked too much again. Grandpa and I can't eat it all, it'll go to waste. Thank you, I replied, taking the glossy round pie without emotion. Eat up, the old lady said, not noticing my indifference. You're a student. You need something sweet so your brain works. Yeah, I replied, shutting the door in her face. Enjoy your meal, creaked the voice from behind the door. I tossed the fake pie onto the table and flopped down on the couch. I was sick of all these games. And suddenly there was another knock. Something stirred inside me. Could it really be? I rushed to the door, opened it anxiously, and saw Jana. Hi, Nazar. Can I come in? She asked. Jana, is it really you? I was stunned, since I thought I'd never see her again. Not long ago, she was lying on the floor, decapitated, and now there was a crack on her neck and dried glue. Who else would it be? She asked cheerfully. My feelings left me again. Just like before, I didn't notice that she was just a doll, an empty shell with nylon hair and a porcelain face. And honestly, I'm just the same. Take my hands, for example. For fingers on each hand are fused together, and the thumbs stick out awkwardly to the sides. Who am I? Why am I here? Is there any meaning to this? What a wonderful smell, Jana exclaimed. Did Aunt Anfisa bring pie again? Yeah, I replied, not noticing any aroma at all. Cherry? The neighbor asked. I have no idea, I said. The soulless beauty with a glued-on head sat down on a chair. So, tell me, how's your book coming along? You know, I'm stuck in one place, I replied. I just can't seem to get things moving.